Oh man, but like, hey, look, dude, I have no qualms with the fact that I'm like kind of somebody said narrow-minded, and I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing. I just like what I like, and I'm okay with that. I'm secure within my own skin, dude. Some people can't do that. I don't care. If you don't like what I like, I don't understand why it's such a big deal, man. I like what I like. I'm allowed to. It shouldn't bother you that much. So yeah, May of 1990, we get Unfun, the debut album, studio album, anyways, by what is called on Wikipedia an American punk rock band, Jawbreaker. It was on Shredder Records, 41 minutes. I think it's only got like 14 songs, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it had
The
12
12.
songs. 12 songs. It was kind of like they're kind of long. Or
Mm-hmm.
in regard to like the stuff that I listen to, typically being
Mm-hmm.
sub 2 minute songs, but yeah, man. So I don't know where you want to start here. Do you want to take a little bit of the initial talk on Jawbreaker, or do you want me to read some of the wiki stuff? Because I'll tell you, man, we can start talking about the music first. Let's start there.
Yeah, let's do that.
How much have you heard this record? How much time did you spend with this record before we decided to pick it for the show?
So both this record and the record we're going to talk about later have the same sort of place in my music listening catalog that I will generally throw them on once a year, basically when I'm in a big binge for other albums that the bands have done. So basically, when and much less so with the next album we're going to talk about, I should say.
Okay.
And probably because there's a little bit less of Jawbreaker to consume, but like usually with me, it's I want to go on a 24-hour revenge therapy, just like month, and that kind of happens. And so kind of in the midst of that, you're filling Jawbreaker, so you go around, and I tend to listen to it then. It's one that outside of the title track though, these songs don't resonate with me in terms of like they stand out a lot, and it's not because they're really really bad. They just sound a lot like the other two Jawbreaker albums. So I feel like sometimes a lot of their songs that aren't on 24-hour revenge therapy can kind of blend together with me, because they are such a dense band with such dense songs, and like there's a lot of, and this album specifically has a lot of stuff thrown into it in the course of like those songs. So this album kind of is a lot. And unlike 24-hour revenge therapy, it's not necessarily like a catchy album, although there's a lot of like there's a lot of pop sensibilities throughout the album. I don't think it's a very like, it's not a catchy kind of throw on while you're doing nothing kind of album. It's one I like to dive into a little bit when I turn on, but I will generally go towards 24-hour revenge therapy. So I kind of will stick with Unfun for one listen, like I said, about once a year. That's about the routine that I get on it.
What's up, guys? So we just partnered up with Dead and Buried Inc. out of LA. So if you have a band or a small business, maybe an event coming up, and you need merch, hit these dudes up. There's a link in the description. If you mention that you got there via the Punk Rock Review, you'll get 10% off of your first order. But it's super high quality screen printing, embroidery. They do shirts, hats, hoodies, skateboards, bags, whatever you want printed, they can handle it, all right? They're also a small business, and they're part of the punk rock community. They're my friends. So this is a partnership that's very important to me. If you need merch, hit these dudes up, check them out. You won't be disappointed, all right? Back to the video. So this will probably not shock anybody. I'm not a big fan of Jawbreaker. Like, I don't like Husker Du. I don't like Jawbreaker typically, but I base a lot of my Jawbreaker like opinions on Dear You, because that's the first Jawbreaker record that I heard. And so I was handed it by somebody. Here, check this out. You might like it. I was listening to a lot of Alkaline Trio and stuff, and they're like, you might like this. And I didn't really care for it. And then I found 24-hour revenge therapy. I liked it okay. I don't know if I've only maybe listened to this one or two times before this, like, deciding to listen to it right now. And if I did, I don't remember it. But I was flabbergasted at how much I enjoyed listening to this.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This was like, I know, dude. It's like,
wow.
It's like, this is like the intersection of Husker Du and Green Day where they meet. And I go, oh, if either of those bands would have sounded more like this, I would have liked them. And I understand that I'm probably just going to be stuck on early Jawbreaker stuff as the stuff I like because of some things that happened to the singer in later in life, and
Mhm.
so, but I'm okay with that. Like, I'd rather like one album than no albums. Like that, I'm perfectly okay with that. I respected Jawbreaker. I respect Husker Du. I just don't listen to the music. But dude, his vocals are insane. I was listening to it and I was like, this is not what I was expecting this to sound like, even a
W-
little bit.
Well, it's pre his throat surgery, and
Right, right. Well,
that's the key. And
that's when I.
it changes the tone of their music, and I have that in my notes for
Oh,
today, and
oh, a lot.
I had never thought about it because this is kind of morbid, but I do like the throat surgery in terms of the songs it gave us for 24-hour revenge therapy. I
Okay.
kind of, in a sick way, it's just part of the band's canon and part of like they're a band that has 5 songs or 6 songs about this dude's throat surgery, and they're pretty good songs, you know. So it's very much part of their lore, I think. But listening to especially some of
100%.
the um like song the tracks on the back half of this album, I was freaked out how much there actually isn't a ton of instrumentation in those songs the way you're used to a Jawbreaker, and it's a lot of Blake's voice just
Yeah.
carried it like almost. And it's weird because it's pre-throat surgery, but his voice sounds gravelly beyond the years that he would have actually been in life at that
Right.
time. You know, they wrote these songs. Both the albums we're going to talk about today were written in when the guys are basically high school, early college age,
Yeah.
and recorded and composed in that time period. And it's amazing how gravelly his voice actually was because you don't associate Blake's voice as much with
Well,
that.
part of it is, and not because I'm a spectacular vocalist, but when I was in a band, that was my duties was vocals.
Mhm.
Uh, that isn't, at least as far as I can tell, a natural sounding vocal pattern. That is him wanting it to sound that way.
Mhm.
So what is funny is that when I was listening to it, I was like, man, I don't remember him ever sounding like this. And then I went and listened to a couple of songs off of 24 Hours, then went and listened to a song or two off of Dear You,
Mhm.
just to make sure that I was like, man, am I tripping, dude? Did I really just miss this whole dude's career? Because
Yeah.
I heard like one song I didn't like, and then I was like, nope, I just don't like the later stuff. And I was like, why would he switch his vocals up? And I was like, outside of maybe signing to a major, and I was like, oh man, is that what really happened? I was like, I couldn't remember. I was like, I don't know a lot about Jawbreaker, so I was like, I can't remember. So I looked it up, and that's why I have the wiki pages open because I was reading about it earlier, and I was like, oh, that's right, dude. This is like 24 Hour was our last indie record. Dear You was their indie debut, correct?
No. So Dear You
Or
is
is it,
their
or
Dear You is their major debut.
wait, I said that wrong. That's what I meant.
So
24 Hours it was like the last indie record they did, and
yeah.
then Dear You was their first major label debut. Excuse me.
All 3 of their underground indie albums are on very indie labels. Like
Yes.
they were never on Epitaph or one of
No, I
those,
just
you know, like
misspoke. I
yeah.
meant Dear You was their major label debut, is what I meant to say.
Yeah,
But
and
like,
sometimes there can be that with a band where they're like super underground and then they have like an Epitaph record. It's kind of like a major
right,
debut and then a major. And
right,
them, no,
right.
they were they were always on these tiny little labels because as I think we mentioned before, the band was always on the verge of breaking up, like with
Yes.
every
No, they broke up
album
like three times.
so there was never like this thought, I think, for them to invest in one of these indies that they were really going to go. Every album they made it on the pretext of we're going to make this album and then quit, and that was
Right,
kind of
right.
the entirety of their
Well,
career.
as I'm listening to this and I listened to the later material, I was like, dude, what would make these guys go this direction with their music after having such a really great like mix of melodic, hardcore, punk rock, indie, like this first album is literally what I wish Husker Du sounded like so that I could like
Mhm,
Husker Du a little bit more. But I can see they're influenced by them heavily.
mhm.
And I was like, what would make them go that direction? And then I thought, oh, was it pressure from the label? I completely forgot the dude had a vocal surgery. And when I started reading on it again, I was like, oh, dude, they had no choice but to go that direction. Like Avenged Sevenfold. Look, I
Yeah,
know I get it, but like
same
same
thing.
thing,
Yeah.
man. Same thing.
But and there's another metal band too. I think it's Trivium or one of those where the singer
Hmm,
notoriously has a blown out voice. And
no kidding.
yeah, and it's funny because again, in pop punk, a blown out voice you wouldn't think is the biggest kill. And there's a lot of other guys in bands that we like that have blown out voices in their second half of their career is a lot more singy. I think it was really just their evolution and what they wanted to be kind of like a 90s Husker Du and that kind of thing where they were very much into punk, influenced by punk, but it wasn't they were again compared to the other Gilman bands and stuff like that, they were just a little bit older than those guys. So they're more people of the 80s, I think, that were operating in the 90s. And then again, these songs are compiled. So it's really weird. The drummer and guitarist were like friends and didn't move to New York for music, but were friends who played in bands and went to college together and kept playing music with people. So they kind of took these songs with them from those early periods to there. They met their bass player when they were in college in New York, and then they moved back to finish this album. And they often talk about like the finishing of this album was really cool because it was the first time the three of them weren't balancing going to college and working on a record. But I would say that's probably why there's so much packed into this record, because it's one of those classic early album unedited records where everything you have, there's no filter of the influence, there's no real decisions. Everything you have was just kind of thrown out there because it was like all the songs that they had written, basically.
Right.
And that's what debut albums tend to be.
Well, it was funny. As I'm listening to it, I just kept thinking like all the bands that I don't like that are like that college rock or grunge or like whatever parallel you want to put with punk. Because in the 90s, you did have a lot of like everything kind of touched in different genres. A lot of bands, like that was the beauty of punk, is that you had a definite lane. But outside that, you had bands that like kind of identified as punk and grunge and college radio and indie, but they're all in the same basket, right? And so you had all these little offshoots, but I thought this Jawbreaker record is the perfect amalgamation of the two. It's got a little bit of punk in it, but it's got all the other stuff from the bands I don't typically like. But this is how I would like them if they were a little bit more like this. So they had a little more, and I don't know. There was an appreciation that I didn't expect that and I think like this, dude. I'm turning 43 in 6 days. I'm just older. Like I like different shit. My palate is changing. I'm growing as a music fan. I'm growing as an adult. And also my channel is forcing things on me that without my channel, I wouldn't have. If I didn't do this channel, I would have never sat down and listened to these records today. I would have just played Rancid albums or whatever. NoFX, Bad Religion, Unseen, Casualties, whatever like typical stuff you would see me listening to on a daily basis. But forcing myself to listen to this stuff has opened up a lot of, I don't know what to call it. Maybe not doors, but like ears. It's opened up my ears a lot to like different stuff. I don't know. It's interesting because maybe this is a step towards liking a band like Husker Du. And I know that Nitty loves that band and really just doesn't understand why I don't like them. And I don't know that I understand either. I just hear it and I don't dig it. But baby steps. You get there, who knows?
I think Jawbreaker is that for a lot of people. Like I think of Jawbreaker, even though they wouldn't necessarily classify themselves as that, but I think of them as like my classic emo band. And they're not classic emo, but they are sort of my access point to that. And what I think their real legacy is they were the band that gave permission or sort of gave carte blanche to expand the sound of pop punk in the late 90s, because all the bands we like, whether they went big or not, like you guys were talking about Lagwagon on your show, you get so much Lagwagon. Lagwagon has whole songs dedicated to Jawbreaker. We talked about Alkaline Trio last week. Those are two bands that don't sound like each other, but they have tons of influence from this band. And I think so I think the kids that were in, like we were talking about, like that specific lane. So the kids that were into a lot of that underground stuff, like you said, they like the punk, the indie rock. And I think what you were getting at too, like if you just listen to college radio, what was great about it is all those different flavors of independent music could kind of coexist. And that's like college radio, although the core genre is sort of that indie basement rock.
Right.
But punk is very much in America has lived off of college rock radio for quite some time. So for me, like that is the legacy of the band, is all these pop punkers who are mostly going to be like the bands that like we're going to talk about next week, like Mr. T Experience and those kind of guys who had this real straightforward pop punk formula, but I think we're exposed to the Husker Du's and the same influences that these guys do, found what these bands did. So the Ramones core bands kind of stayed, I think, in that true pop punky fashion, but a lot of those late 90s bands, I think they were influenced by that kind of emo sound, and the way they knew to put it into their music was the way that Jawbreaker do it. Now, Jawbreaker didn't like any of those bands really. They didn't think those bands really followed in. They liked even the more corny emo that came in like the mid 2000s. They thought that was actually cool. They thought that was actually more of the offshoot of them than the bands that, and it's just funny because the people you influence, that's not always the audience. I don't know if it's not true, because Jawbreaker was very much part of the scene. So I don't want to say that, but they
don't strike me as fans of a lot of these bands. I can't imagine them being like big fans of Lagwagon or big fans of Alkaline Trio.
Well,
do they like the guys in the band? Probably.
Yeah.
Would they like some of their songs? Sure. But like to the extent that we're fans of that stuff, and there's no way.
Well, yeah, and I don't think that many people, especially if you're like a musical influenced person, are that big of fans of stuff that comes after you anyway. Like, so, and I think that's
valid.
I think that's part of it. Here's the other thing that I always think about with them. So for me, you, I think, got to experience them right at the end of their run, right? Probably, or no, it's years later, right? This is years later, but you got exposed through Dear You. So I would assume a lot of your peers who would have given that kind of music a chance would have really liked Jawbreaker. That's like one of those bands that you were probably hearing about from people that like that kind of music.
So I skated, right? And when Weezer came out,
mm-hmm.
I was already into punk, but all my skater friends liked Weezer, and through Weezer they got into Jawbreaker. That's how that's how that happened. And I liked Weezer, okay, so they were like, "Here, listen to this." And like also Pixies, Nirvana fans also like Jawbreaker. Like so there was like a commonality. So Green Day fans, Weezer fans, Nirvana, Pixies, all those guys like Jawbreaker. Now the fans of like the Casualties, Dead Kennedys, Unseen, Black Flag, they didn't necessarily like Jawbreaker, and that's the camp that I kind of fit in mostly, right? But I also hung out. Dude, the 90s was a fucking mixed bag, dude. You got trail mix everywhere. You didn't have a bag of fucking peanuts or cashews, dude. You got trail mix, dude. You just got like a smorgasbord of flavors, and if you don't like it, too bad.
That's
it was all in a big bag together.
We're all siloed now. We can all watch our, like my Spotify is exactly what I want to see, what you want to see. Back then you'd have these bills with a lot of these bands that were just vaguely, all these bands that listened to the same bands but didn't sound anything like each other, that could be
crazy
on similar bills. And so for like Jawbreaker, they were almost like a ghost to me. They were almost like mythical to me when I started getting into this kind of music, because all the people I liked, it was like their favorite band that didn't exist anymore. It was just like the weirdest thing. And I think in like the early 2000s, late 90s, there wasn't losers like us on podcasts who were just going over the same albums over and over again. So it's just, they were like this mythical thing. Like, what is up with Jawbreaker? So and even their name, I thought they were going to be some really intense, like, jawbreaking, some like street punk band. And then,
really?
Yeah, just off of the name and stuff. And then I remember I heard a lot of bands covering Boxcar from 24 Hour Revenge Day, which sounds much more like a pop punk song than anything else in their catalog. But then going through it and then listening to it, you get why everyone, at least I do, I get why it resonated with the people that produce the kind of music that we make, but I also kind of get why it resonated with a lot of fans back in the day. But I think what ended up happening with them is they were one of those all or nothing bands for a lot of their fans. Like, their fans were so into them. And then so whenever they would make a mistake or something that some of their core fan base did, like, the backlash to them would be really, really intense. And part of that, I think, was that they were older, so they were probably a little bit. I don't think that they were friendly with everyone. I know, like, Ben Weasel and Blake were friends, and they were good friends with really all the East Bay crew guys. But I don't know how much they really hung out with like just the general public in the East Bay, because they're like 24-year-old college dudes versus all these other guys who are like 17 years old, borrowing money to go hang out at Gilman. And Jawbreaker was one of the biggest bands at Gilman. They were huge, but like part of that expansion of their universe, as we were talking about, because they were older, but they're in this scene that's blowing up with Green Day and Op Ivy and all these guys, but they're able to play at over 21 bars a lot more often than a lot of these. So they're exposed to these other kind of bands. And it's off of this album and Booviac is where Kurt Cobain becomes this huge Jawbreaker fan and invites them to go on tour in the early 90s. A lot of
their fans didn't like that.
Yeah, people saying that they sold out by being invited on the tour, which is funny because, like, I laugh at this. They sold out so much that they found a way to sell their t-shirts in the parking lot to avoid like whatever the Live Nation was at the time that's taking the fee of the merch. And it was like they sold so much merch on that tour. People wanted their tour. Kurt Cobain wore the shirt for the next 3 days after they left the tour. So this thing that should have really been a boon for them. And again, they weren't signed to a major. They're riding in a van behind all these other big things, but just the invitation to be on that tour was one of those things that just pissed people off.
It's because people are jealous, man. And like, here's the thing is like, okay, this might make sense to some people that don't understand my problem. I don't even say problem. My lack of fandom for this band up until recently, right?
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, Jawbreaker was the band that when you had like that hot, intelligent girl that was hanging out and you wanted to impress her, it was Jawbreaker and like Saves the Day and like, Taking Back Sunday, all those bands.
That's the boy music.
Yeah. So like, I couldn't get into it back then because I was so full of piss and vinegar that like I needed something a little more upbeat. So I was never going to like this music when it first came out. And I was never going to like it when I was young. I had to get it later on in life. But I remember being like having resentment towards these kind of bands because like, I was like, I don't get it. Why can't I just like the music that I like, and then people not really care? It's like, no, you have to impress people with the stuff you like, because that's the groups of people I was hanging out with. You know, music heads. There's a certain like social ladder within music that, like, if you don't like this band, you're not cool. And back then, I wasn't, secure within my own nerddom. Like, I wasn't okay with the fact that I was just a punk rock kid. I just so desperately wanted to be cared about and liked and talked to. It wasn't about like popularity more so than it was company. I wanted company. I was lonely when I was young, man. I didn't have a lot of friends, and I didn't have a lot of family. So like, I spent a lot of time by myself, and music like this, I didn't understand it. Like, the things they were talking about was not stuff that I was taking part in. Like, I never went to college. They even had like topical stuff that I just didn't resonate with. You know what I'm saying? I was much more in the it's more punk rock, with the anti-fascist movements, and wanting to be out on my own, and rebellion is the word I was looking for, like just straight rebellious lyrical content. And I wasn't what's the word, man? Like, esteemed enough. I didn't get it quite yet. I wasn't really there. I wasn't. Yeah.
Jawbreaker has that vibe to them, and it's not their fault necessarily, but they're the fandom around, and that's what I was saying. They were kind of mythical. Like, I remember feeling uncool for a while because I didn't know Jawbreaker.
Right.
It was just kind of like well, I don't know, dude. I'm like 11. How the hell the album came out when I was 3? How should I know Jawbreaker?
I'm 16 and I listen to Blink-182. What makes you think I like Jawbreaker? There's so much more ahead of where I'm at.
Exactly. That's literally where the kind of, I don't care that Tom's talking about this Jawbreaker brand, has the Husker Du thing on his guitar, and is talking about this Descendant, which,
if you think about it, the thing is that those guys that we were listening to were older than us by like 5 to 10 years. So they were into Jawbreaker. Of course they were. But we were young, and we're listening to what we liked, which is these guys that are just a little bit older. So we're like, yeah, we want to like this stuff. This is like, and that's why when bands like Angels and Airwaves and Boxcar Racer come out, it doesn't surprise me, because those bands were listening to that stuff, and all those bands are incredibly influenced by stuff outside of the punk rock landscape. So,
which is funny too, because
myself at all.
A lot of those bands though too that loved Jawbreaker but didn't sound like them at the time, that I would have like. All those bands, if you look at their career, how they went, look at the second half of Blink-182's career, and tell me they didn't listen to a ton of Jawbreaker through their more drawn out emo eras, and the way they like. And a lot of it's the hip hop influence, obviously, of Travis and all that. But like, they laugh at people calling them an emo band because they refer to themselves as like a Jawbreaker copying band, which they didn't really think of Jawbreaker as emo, back in the most traditional senses. And that's why I really like them, as like, they created whatever like this bastardized emo is that the old emo heads didn't like. And I think people like you and I kind of didn't like it just because it was the music of younger people. Like, for me, that mid 2000s emo is the stuff that like I was just like it just cringed me.
Yeah, I don't like any of that.
Even though like a lot of the fictions of it were not that different than my Warped Tour music from 3 years prior, but I couldn't vibe with that. And it's part of that is just time going on, and you're just a little bit older. You don't know, when you're 21 or 20, you don't like the things that 14-year-olds like. Like, that's the most cool thing in the world. I was
just gonna say that when you're just a like college age or a little bit older, the stuff high school kids are into, you want to distance yourself from it, because you're just like, no, I only like more mature stuff than that. Oh, I don't like Good Charlotte would be a great example. Like, I do not like that band, but I feel like if I was born 5 years later, I might have liked them okay, because I would have had a whole completely different view on music. I wouldn't have gotten into Rancid when I got into them. Everything would have been 5 to 10 years later in my life. So I think Good Charlotte might have been a band that I've been like, that's my guilty pleasure. Whereas like, I genuinely do not like their music right now, because when I was 23, 24, they were coming out. And I was like, oh, what the fuck is this garbage? You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
But people that are like younger than me by 5 to 10 years are like, yeah, they're all right. And I'm like, I understand it. I just disagree.
I think that has a lot to do with like, whatever is the pop music, regardless of genre, whenever you're like young, whenever you're in that super young period, even if you say you don't like it, you are, you're kind of, it's the music that's going on for better or worse at the time that you're like, your body felt the best that it ever did. Like, even if your young life isn't so great, there's still a certain fondness that we have to things that we experienced when we were growing up. And I think some of that, if you didn't experience some of that stuff that's just straight up pop music, it doesn't resonate with you. We talked about that a couple weeks on the best episode. It's like, I know you're not going to like this because this only would work if you were 16 when you heard it the first time. And then it's like the Cars for people that heard the Cars in like 1983. You know, it's forever with them. And I think you're like that with like a lot of Ramones core stuff. Like a lot of the cheesier music you like comes from that.
Ramones core,
a lot of that Ramones core stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point.
Would have popped right around that time of adolescence with you. A lot of that stuff kind of fits all those parameters.
Yeah,
I think everyone has those kind of outlets. I think Jawbreaker is that, I think, for a lot of punks as sort of the other thing, that because it's acceptable, you know, to listen to Jawbreaker. So I think
they've come around to being like the cool band again. Like they're fully back as like another band. I mean, I say again, it's probably been that way for a long time now, but like Jawbreaker is highly regarded kings of their subgenre. Like, you know, people strive to be like them. They're cited as references in a lot of, or inspirations and references in a lot of these other bands' catalogs.
They're like the older kids from like a previous like football team or something that won state that no one has footage from that game. I feel like that's the weird thing. And because again, they broke up early, they disappeared before the real boom of the music. And I think their breakup was so ugly and stuff, and everything felt ugly about that, so that they were kept at it almost benefited them to have that like myth. I think if they would have they've been back together a few times and they played some shows and like everyone has done, you know, as the years have gone on. But had they have got back together like in 2001 to be a supporting act for like a Blink-182 or something like that, it would have been a disaster. Like that would have been terrible. They needed to not be one of these bands that was just so commercialized. And I think they were one of those bands too that maybe their biggest punk bona fide of all of them is they really had trouble with like the music business. That just did, even though they were a very accessible band for a lot of people, they still, like a lot of these punk bands, they couldn't quite play the game in the right kind of way. There's a story on like how on Dear You, they wanted, because I mean the label did not like the album, just straight up. They didn't think it was great, but they did negotiate full creative control, as a lot of the indie bands did back then. If they were going to sign, they were going to, you know, you're not going to mess with their stuff. And they re-recorded Boxcar, and they wanted to put Boxcar on Dear You. And it was the band members who said, absolutely, we're not going to swindle our fans. That belongs to our old fans. That's their song. The reason the label wanted to put it on that way, there's a big song that the crowd goes wild for when they play and they seem like big stars. And they were like, no, that belongs to our fans that have been with us since day one. The other, you know, these newer fans don't get to just claim that song. And they're like, damn, that's awesome. But also, when you look at how their career went, it was probably those sort of principles that did them in. But I kind of don't care.
I think that's like, stupid. Cooler. I think it's stupid, man.
No,
I think it's stupid because it's like, I understand the sentiment. I understand what they're saying, and I don't disagree with that way of thinking. But you're stealing from your new fans at that point. So what? You don't want your new fans to hear this because they're not cool enough? Like, what kind of dumb shit is that? Like, just put the song on the record. Have a little bit more success, make the label happy. They might give you a little more freedom, do what you want your next record. Like, it sounds to me like a big giant mistake that they made. And like, I don't know. I understand that. I guess I kind of feel both of them. I understand both sides of that coin. Like, because I get it being like, no, man, we want to just move on from that. We've already created that. But I also look at it from like a financial perspective. Like, hey, man, we've invested a lot of money and time into you. Can we please have a song that's going to make sure we don't lose our ass? You know, being the stuff that I do, I kind of understand that. Like, and I also think it makes sense to give a new audience a song that's for sure good. But, you know, being the musician and the artist, you're like, I don't want to. And I understand that too. So don't sign the contract with the artist if you're not going to let the artist do the artist thing. So
I don't think I would make that same decision either. I think I would put the song on there. I just think it's like, it really, like they were that sort of militant in the way they kind of went about all things, that it just shows there's a certain admirable quality to it, of the way that Jawbreaker, all these bands talk about making compromises and not making compromises, and you don't think of it and like an emo poppy band like Jawbreaker, but they were like the most unflinching. Even though they signed to the label, they were very unflinching in all of these things. And them signing to the label, I think, was the feeling that they had peaked, and then that, like a lot of these bands, the scene turned on them anyway. And for them in 1994. Green Day are millionaires. Nirvana, who likes them, they're about to come down. Everyone around them's life is changing, and everyone whose life is changing is saying, "What a great band this band is!" And they're not making any money.
Stop worrying about everybody calling you a sellout and just sell the fuck out and take the money, man. I've never understood that, because you're gonna resent your audience and your peers if you don't just go where it's naturally taking you. Like if it's organically taking you somewhere and you can get a record deal and go get some money without having to really sell out your principles, then you're not actually selling anything out. But the thing is, people are so worried about what everybody else thinks that they're terrified to go make this decision. Fuck you, man. It's good for me. I'm going to do it. If you don't like me after that, that's because you never liked me at all. You only like the idea of me being independent and me being your little thing. You're gatekeeping my music. That's not for you to do. Fuck off. I want everybody to hear it. I got bills to pay. Like, you know, you can only be so punk rock for so long. At a certain point, you have got to concern yourself with your financial stability. And, you know, yeah, they probably did get miserable after that. Can you imagine giving up the opportunity to be of the same ilk of Nirvana and Green Day? And you're just like, no, I want to be DIY. Fuck off. You're out of your mind. No, I will take that money and then I'll do Foxborough hot tubs and Pinhead gunpowder. Gee, somebody we know did it right. Like, what are we talking about? It's so crazy, man. I get so tired of the elitist punk rock argument because I guess it's because I've been poor my whole life, so I understand it. It's like, no, dude, take it, man. Like you only get one chance sometimes, you know. But they're you know they're legendary in the process. So like, what do I know? What the fuck am I talking about?
It's easy when it's not your money and your livelihood too. Because I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. The Jawbreaker did that, but like they're
right,
maybe
dude.
thinking about like, maybe if we could have had another album out of it or something. And part of the whole thing is if their major label album wouldn't have been such a dud. That's the difference between them and Green Day and Nirvana and those ones. Is there? And I don't think it's as bad as its reputation, but it's their flop album, so it has that reputation of being like extra. It has a reputation of being worse than it probably actually is because in the narrative of things, it killed the band. So it's sort of,
I don't know what the reputation of it is. I genuinely don't. I thought it was a popular album until very recently, so I didn't know that it was like thought of as bad. But when I listened to it recently, I was like, this shit is terrible. So
the guys we were talking about who loved Jawbreaker, who loved him, like who wanted to make music, they all pretty much appreciate it as just another evolution of Jawbreaker. And but it was such like it was one of those things where the label didn't like stop promoting it after like a couple weeks into the promotion of it, that it was doing that bad. Like it was one of those that just it tanked commercially. It was one of those things where I think they pissed off the fans that didn't like them for signing, and then the fans that would have given them a chance, you know, the newer audience they were supposed to didn't really like the music that they were presented. So and then the band never got along, so it just sucks. Like I always feel like there's such like a tragic tale, not tragic because I mean they didn't die or anything, but it's just like I guess music or different types of art, those sort of artists exist, right? That just have that little moment in time. And then, and sometimes like their moment in time and forgotten about. Jawbreaker was not forgotten about. They were just like, they're a moment in time. And then, but it's just, even like their music sounds frozen in time. It's weird. Maybe because they just don't have a lot of it. It's weird.
Yeah, right? They don't have a lot of music. That is for sure. I mean, they've got a fair bit. You know, 4 albums isn't nothing to Scott. Was it 5 maybe? I don't know, however many it is. But
four on the original run, and then there's like a later release that I don't know if that's an album or a compilation, but like the original run is 4 albums. Yeah.
So 4 albums. I mean, that's a fair bit of music, but it's also like when you look at bands like Green Day and even Rancid, they've got like 10. You know, it's like they just kept it pushing. They kept going. Even they took breaks and stuff like. But yeah, I do feel some sympathies for them because it's like, man, they were in a weird place at a weird point in time where it just they had to try to maintain some kind of integrity that wasn't actually there. That the whole it's just not there. It's not real. It's not real. You got to take care of yourself. Like I'm so glad that I understand that because when I was in my 20s, I definitely probably thought like, no, I would never do that. Blah blah blah. And I'm glad I never got the opportunity to fuck myself like that because boy, I tell you. I would resent myself so much if I had the opportunity to be a millionaire in my 20s and it was like, no, I'm going to be super fucking punk rock. It's like, nobody cares, dude. Nobody cares about you. Those people don't care about you. When it comes down to it, are they going to help you financially? Nope. So like, take care of yourself. Bro, how different do I act when I got a family? You know what I'm saying? Like if I didn't have kids, I probably wouldn't be saying any of this.
Yeah, I mean that's the perspective of everything, and that's why Jawbreaker is so confounding because you don't have like we're going to talk about Green Day in a little bit, and last year we talked about a band of guys that were nearing their 60s, and then we're going to talk a little bit about guys who were 17 years old when they wrote an album. Now Jawbreaker kind of had the vibe of like they're an old soul kind of band. I think Blake was an old soul, like he's an old man just by heart, and his lyrical delivery, his lyrics, the stuff it's about. He's sort of like he affects that kind of style. But we never got to see an evolution with that. We never got to see them making contrast albums to like the poppy stuff in the 2000s. Because sometimes some of these pioneers, they'll go like underground, or they'll do something different, completely different than the stuff that they're inspiring. And I feel like, we kind of missed out on it. But then again,
Well,
like Fat Mike said, the Ramones have a lot of albums that people don't like because they stayed around so long. So maybe that's the case too. Maybe we wouldn't like them as much if they were there longer.
You remember? I don't remember what made me think of this a second ago, but I guess probably talking about their major label flop. Do you remember when Pinkerton came out? Maybe not. Maybe you're not old enough to remember that.
No, I know it's got the legacy of
So when that album came out, dude, everybody's rewriting history. They're like, "Dude, Pinkerton's a great album." I'm like, I remember when Pinkerton came out. Everybody, myself included, hated that record. It was awful. But people change, and as you grow up, so people listen to it again. It's just like me listening to this and listening to this Green Day album and having a different opinion on it than I did a little while back. Specifically Jawbreaker. Like, I used to really just not get it. And listening to this album, I had a blast listening to it, man. I really, really enjoyed it. I put like 5 or 6 songs on my personal playlist. It takes a lot for me to do that. So
I do think, before we get into the songs, I do think what is good about this album is that, like, say if this is the only album you listen to, you basically do get the full Jawbreaker experience. Like, it's not my favorite of their albums, but you can like Jawbreaker, you can like this album and kind of, I think, say you like or understand or appreciate Jawbreaker because it's enough. Even though it's a debut album, it's authentic enough to their sound, their songwriting, all those things.
That's what it is. It's more pure Jawbreaker. It's not been around for a few years, changed their opinions on things. No, this is when they started the band, this is what they were envisioning. And that's what I thought was great about listening to it. And I was just so damn happy that I liked it because I was really expecting to be like, nope, thought it sucked. And people don't like my opinion sometimes. And I think people will be pleasantly surprised that I enjoyed this enough to really kind of fawn over it a little bit.
Yeah. 24-Hour Revenge Therapy, you didn't like at all. So I was expecting you
that album
to not
sucks.
like this. Yeah.
Okay, sucks is a strong word. That song is not good. I mean, that album, is not good to me. I need to go back and re-listen to it after listening to this one, though, I'll be honest.
It might have a slightly different.
Right. Dude, it's so annoying.
I've listened to it a little bit, because again, it puts me in the Jawbreaker mood, and it's not that different, but it's like it is a contrast.
His vocals are quite a bit different on it, and that's what I liked about this album the most. But it really drives me nuts when I have to go back and eat some crow and be like, okay, I changed my mind, because I change my mind all the time, and that people don't understand that about me, dude. My mind changes. Like, I like what I like on the day that I wake up. Tomorrow I may not like it, and tomorrow I may like something more. I don't let that bother me too much. It just drives me nuts when people can't understand it, because people don't get that. I guess people like what they like and they stick with it forever. And I'm like, I kind of fluctuate. I'm like, no, I like what I like now. And as an example, I like that Cheshire Cat. Remember what I said about that album 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
I hated that record. I listened to it recently and I had a blast. I don't know what's going on with me right now, bro. I don't know what is going on with me. I have no idea.
Your Descendants conversion is my favorite of all of them.
Oh my goodness, dude.
Your conversions.
Well, dude, the Clash one's probably the most insane. Like, how many bands have I hated on?
The Clash one's funnier because you declared them dead as it, like.
Dude,
of how you felt about them. That one's funny.
Man, the Descendants, I just thought they were overrated. And then I watched the documentary and was like, oh, I get it now. Milo's just like my kid. And then I was like, oh, all these songs make sense to me now. And then I saw him live and I was like, oh, it is my kid. Jeez Louise, what have I been thinking all these years? Like, if I didn't have my kid, I probably would hate the Descendants still. Oh, man. But like, hey, look, dude, I have no qualms with the fact that I'm like kind of, somebody said narrow-minded, and I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing. I just like what I like, and I'm okay with that. I'm secure within my own skin, dude. Some people can't do that. I don't care. If you don't like what I like, I don't understand why it's such a big deal, man. I like what I like. I'm allowed to. It shouldn't bother you that much. But I do think it's a little courageous of me to consistently be able to go back and either go, okay, this wasn't as good as I thought it was, or, okay, this is actually way better than I thought it was. It takes a little courage to do this, man, because I get a lot of crap for it, but I just don't. I think it's interesting. I think it's cool that I can just kind of weave in and out of liking things and not liking things, and who knows? In 2 or 3 years,
there are no rules, by the way. Like, there's
well, you wouldn't know that listening to the fucking internet. I mean,
no, it's true, but like, we all need to remember that with all this stuff, with music discourse, there's no actual rules. But sometimes we like to categorize ourselves and define ourselves by what we listen to or what we're not listening to. How that defines us. It literally it's song. They're songs. They're sounds. There's not rules.
Well, I want to move on to Green Day here in a second, but before we do that, I want to just tell you there's 5 songs off this record that I really kind of love at this point, man. And
Okay.
the first 4 of them are all within the first few songs.
Okay.
So I'll give you the numbers first, but it's track 1, 3, 4, and 6. That would be Want, Fine Day, Incomplete, and Busy. Those are all songs that like I was shocked. I listened to the first half of the record like twice. Like I got like through like song 6 or 7 and just restarted it and was like, what is going on, bro? Because I couldn't believe I was liking it so much. And I was so shocked by his vocal style because I'd forgotten about all that stuff with his vocal stuff. So this was like I don't know that I've ever heard this album, if I'm honest with you. So there's that. So I don't have any reason to apologize for anything if I've never heard the record. Just like the Clash thing. I'd never heard Give 'Em Enough Rope. When I did, I was like, oh, I get it now. Sometimes it just takes hearing something you haven't ever heard. You know, I spent a lot of time with the same 20 records because I was fucking poor growing up and I only had those records. But also the song very much close to the end is called Gutless. I listened to that song probably 4 times today. It's really, really good. But yeah, man, I enjoyed this Jawbreaker deep dive. I think I will give. I know I've never heard. How do I say the second album?
Bivouac.
Bivouac.
I think it's Bivouac.
Whatever. However you pronounce it. I've never even seen that cover before. So like, I'll probably give that one a listen this week at some point just to listen to it. I think I'll probably end up liking it. Okay.
Real quick, I've got Want, Fine Day, Imaginary War, Busy, Softcore, and Driven as sort of my.
We like most of the same songs.
Most of the same ones, yeah, and really, like I always say, Want could be on 24-hour Revenge Therapy. That is like perfect Jawbreaker. All the elements of the Jawbreaker, the I part. That's very much like one of those vocal stylings that they would do. And then you guys did Lagwagon on the other show the other week, and the song Fine Day is totally ripped off by Lagwagon in like 5 songs, and there's one song specifically where the chord progression is just right there. Like, and I spent the early part of the afternoon listening to the first half and middle of Lagwagon songs to find the one, and I couldn't. But just know that Fine Day sounds like a Lagwagon song. Comments, help me out. What song am I thinking of? Dude,
I hate when that happens, when I can't remember something that I know.
Every time I would listen to it, it pops in my head. I'm like, okay, I gotta mention this. I gotta do the research. Let me look real smart. Find the Lagwagon song. And I was driving home from work, just flipping through Lagwagon songs and not finding this exact part.
That's funny, bro. That is hilarious.